So last but not least, over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. And thank you, the city of Plymouth and Ed and Hannah and the team for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to share some of the ideas that are behind Fab City, and hopefully I will be able to illustrate a little bit why we believe it's important. A little bit about me, because I feel like I'm talking with a community that each other more or less. I'm far away. I'm in Indonesia at the moment, but I'm actually from Venezuela. And during the last 15 years, I've been there running FabLab Barcelona, which I established in 2007 at the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, where I also run a program called Master in Design for Emerging Futures. I would, together with many people, incredible people, we started the Fab City Global Initiative, and now here in Bali, I'm starting the Meaningful Design Group. And you will see all of them are connected in one way to another. So I wanted to start saying that I believe we are in a very critical moment of convergence, similar maybe to the beginning of the 20th century or probably to the 15th century, where crisis or a kind of a critical change of culture or the way we perceive the world happens at the same time that it's a big technological advancement happens, right? At the moment, our crises are multiple. It's not only one. There are some that are more, obvious, others that probably we did not expect it, and others that are, we know very well, and we are not doing anything about them, right? Like the climate crisis. The influence, especially in this last crisis, it has something that is transforming the way in which we might understand we intervene in the world. And what I mean is that, from this graph, there's a very clear explanation that there are things that change very slow and there are things that change very fast. Nature used to change very slow, and things that we were predicted to change, we were able to predict the changes of nature. We invented things like agriculture. But then fashion is something that changed very fast. What's happening with the influence of humankind in the planet is that we are making nature to change as fast as fashion. Therefore, we need to be more resilient for those transformations, right? And the way in which digital technologies, for instance, are transforming, infrastructure or governance is also producing changes that are, more difficult to be anticipated. And you call it now, like more recently, the global pandemic has changed everything just almost at once. So we need to be more resilient because things are changing faster. At the same time, technologies are converging as well. Some of them that you might hear more often as buzzwords like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, blockchain most recently, and all the crypto fever that is happening at the moment, are also happening at the same time in which we have all these crises as well. And we are not including yet, or there's something that is like a little tsunami coming, which is all the biotechnology revolution that is is probably turning humans into gods, being able to manipulate life. So what changes, the difference between this moment of convergence and other moments, as I said before, the beginning of the 20th century and the introduction of the assembly line or the oil as a base of the base of all the energy, a lot of energy produced in the world, or material ecology, is in my opinion, the access to knowledge and the access to tools. These principles of access to knowledge and access to tools, it was something reflected in Stuart Brand's and other colleagues, the Hollert catalog, which was a publication that started in the 60s. It was documenting open source, instructions to be more resilient. That's kind of the pre-internet open source sharing of knowledge about how to set up your photovoltaic panel in the backyard, to how to cultivate potatoes, etc., right? There's other different conditions in which this kind of a power of resilience emerges, and this is a couple of publications that happened in the in the Cuba, in the post, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Cuba, the Cuban population had to really invent and be very resilient because all the supplies were coming from the Soviet Union. And then you started to see what happens is that the population started to innovate and how to replace batteries, how to turn the motors of washing machines into fans because it's very hot in Cuba, right? And all of this was documented in these two books that you can find now thanks to an artist called Ernesto Orosa that are called With Our Own Efforts, or The Book of a Family, in which there is just recipes in order to be resilient in the post-Soviet Cuba. So the kind of tools that we have now are a bit different, right? So all that knowledge that that you used to have in a physical book, now you can have it in your hand with a super powerful computer that is hyper connected. That turns us these are not only tools to consume information, but actually to produce information, ideally beyond Instagram. And they look like this, like 70 years ago. So this is how your phone looked like, just a little bit over a half a century ago. This is how the future of fabrication looks today. And we need to think about how it's going to look in the next, 10, 30, or 50 years, right? Right now, Fab Labs are these clunky spaces with machines that are noisy, that make things that they don't look perfect as the industry would produce it. But they're great places to learn how things are made, to share knowledge, and to make things, as long as you are good on changing the aesthetics of things and not trying to replicate the industry as it is. And more importantly, it's not about only your place, but it's a network that is highly connected. Since we opened FabLab Barcelona in 2007, and it was like there were like 10 Fab Labs in the world by the moment. Right now, there are over 2,000 Fab Labs in the world. All these Fab Labs, they share more or less the same equipment, which is kind of a playing football, right? Or you have certain rules, and you have a certain amount of people playing in the field, and everybody knows how to play football. So this is very similar. But what is the added interest on this is that you can go in the most southern Fab Lab here in Puerto Williams in Chile, and you can design something and ship it to the north of China. This is not North Korea, right? No, it's the north of China. And you can share a file of how a thing is made, and the thing can be replicated in the other side of the world without having to put it in a shipping container, ideally, right? And this happens in some different levels within the Fab Lab network. There are most of the Fab Labs are concentrated in Europe and in the global north, and just maybe 30% or maybe less are located in the global south. It's something I think that I will tap into, because there is some of these north-south dependencies, which usually we don't consider when thinking about the materials in which we are depending upon. We think about local production only in terms of manufacturing local things, but then we're depending on supply chains that come from colonial relationships, or extractive relationships that come from the past. So Fab Labs have the potential to transform the way we make things and the way we prototype, but for me it's more important the way we learn, right? And basically they started out of a class. This is the How to Make Almost Anything class, has been taught by Professor Neil Gershenfeld since the beginning of this millennia, and let's put it like that. And in order to go to this class, you have to be an MIT student, which is very expensive. And you have to be very brave, actually, to graduate from MIT. It's a lot of, if you go to the hallways of MIT, you will see a lot of notes of psychological support for students. The difficulty of studying in such a demanding school. But then what we have been trying to do is to make the idea of going to MIT to learn about digital fabrication obsolete. Because when we have a distributed network of Fab Labs, we can turn it in a distributed campus where people can learn in their lab, but also can learn from the same professor that teaches at MIT. This is Neil Gershenfeld teaching a class to over 70 Fab Labs in the world on how to make almost anything, as if they are MIT students. We have graduated over 3,000 people. They develop projects that are trying to change the way we produce food, the way we monitor our environment, the way we develop tools for farmers to be more competitive and use technology to automate certain processes that are very annoying for small farmers especially, and to promote farming and as something that as a diversified micro farms instead of like a long uses of land for monoculture. Projects that are based on using open source tools to monitor the environment in the city. This is a project I've been personally involved. You can check, there was a BBC feature. I can share some links afterwards in the chat of things I have been mentioning. But there's a small feature on the BBC that came to Barcelona and recorded how we use these sensors in order for our neighbors to fight against the noise produced by drunken people in a plaza, causing for kids and elderly not being able to sleep, which creates sleep deprivation, which influence the way they learn, and so on and so on. To beehives, again, following the same open source principles, trying to stimulate people to produce their own beehives in order to have their own bee colonies. Bees are very good for the environment, especially for ecosystems, and keep the richness of ecosystems. But also we, together with a team in the United States, we contributed to the development of tools to monitor the health of the bees inside the hive using sound frequencies, to projects that, going through a different scale, not just objects, but we were able to design an entire restaurant and make it an open source. So basically you go to the restaurant and can download the furniture or send it to the other side of the world to replicate it, or use the waste of the restaurant to develop new materials in order to make leather, and turn your lab into more like a kitchen in which you can develop your own bioplastics. These are very small examples. I know this is tiny in comparison with the force of places like Amazon. But I've seen, as I said before, I've seen the labs, the FabLab network growing from being only 10 labs in the world to be over 2,000 in these last 15 years. And this opened an opportunity to think about design as something that happens in an open way against the whole idea of intellectual property and patenting that happens distributed against the idea of having production and where labor is cheap and where materials are cheap, and circular design, thinking about how we can recirculate all the materials that are produced in a city into the production streams, right? I want to be very fast because I think like I have a couple of minutes left and I want to reach to Fab City, but basically changing this paradigm is fundamental in order to think about the future of urbanization as something more productive, to evolve this idea of producing stock, keeping the same again extractive principles of the colonial times, in which you want to control the magic formula or a magic resource that is in a magic island, like at the north of Indonesia, for instance, when nutmeg was the thing that everybody wanted to control. The Dutch and the British were fighting against for the control of it. And then you guaranteeing that control will give you like an advantage in the market, right? That's what is behind this model. This is the same principles that are now based in our industrial society, which is the principle of the winner that takes it all. The principles of creating stock because the higher volume of production, the cheaper the prices, and then you could create false necessities for people to buy things that they actually don't need. So it's all attached and all connected. And then we started to imagine, as I said before, this idea of how design could be different, how people share the recipes of designs instead of moving. You don't ship pizzas from Napoli to the world. You share the recipes, and you have the infrastructure and the materials to make pizzas locally. I'm saying let's not just replicate. What I'm saying here is not to turn FabLabs into microfactories, but it's like to use them as a catalyst to think about how local production can look like at the regional level and at the metropolitan level. And we learn a lot from this platform that we are running now. We inherited from a team from Scotland. It's called MakeWorks, which try to map all the the capacities for manufacturing that happen in a region, and then basically becomes a way to connect to the culture of manufacturing in that place, to connect with people, to to connect designers that prototype things in Fab Labs or in maker spaces on the university to the possibility of doing local production with local materials. This is kind of a provocation to, for us to think about what is the infrastructure that we need for the 21st century. We have been investing in roads, and trains, railways, airports, especially in Spain. There are like a lot of unused airports. It's really stupid. We keep like investing in infrastructure to move atoms around the world. And then the provocation that we're doing here is that how we think about the infrastructure that we need for the 21st century, which is how we move. Okay, so I have time. So how we move, thank you, Ed. How we move from investing in infrastructure to transport materials around the world, to think about the infrastructure that we need in cities in our bioregions. Actually, I love the reference to Patrick Guedes, because it's kind of one of the intellectual fathers of bioregionalism. How to think about infrastructure that keeps materials circulating locally and keeps information circulating globally, right? Very different from, again, railways, from airports and from ports. So this leads us to cities, right? Cities and bioregions, I would say. But basically, our question, out of nurturing the growth of this FabLab network by developing educational programs, by supporting some of the innovations that come of the network, is how we can think bigger and imagine the kind of transformations that could happen at the city and regional level when we really support this kind of, all this has been happening with kind of ad hoc, or kind of a own investment of organizations and time, like in some cases support of certain governments in some public Fab Labs in the world, but mainly it's kind of a private initiatives. And now it's starting to be part of some programs, even in the European Union, with some of the projects that we run. But the whole idea here is like the thinking about a productive urbanization based on the principle of resilience. And resilience is increased when you have the means of production. And having the means of production, it means the infrastructure, but also it means the knowledge to the means of production. And in one hand, we have vast access to knowledge that we misuse. Again, and we probably use like a very small percentage of the computing power of our funds. And in the other hand, we're putting the money of infrastructure in the wrong places, in my opinion, again. So in order to provoke this conversation, we launched Fab City as a new paradigm for productive cities. And this almost stated something unintended. We were seeing the Fab Lab network growing. We see the potential for Fab Labs to change this paradigm, as Anna was mentioning, from going to cities that they are depending on what they import, right, from all around the world, and the only thing that they produce is trash, to thinking about the cities that they keep the material circulating locally, and data circulates globally. So in 2014, we convinced by the time mayor of Barcelona that this was a great idea. And he accepted to make, in a public event that was a global Fab Lab gathering, he made a speech, and at the end of the speech, he pressed a button and started a countdown of 40 years for Barcelona to produce almost everything it consumes. And that clock keeps ticking. If you go to the Fab City website, you will see it. But what led after that commitment is that we convinced also the mayor to invest in a public infrastructure and think about Fab Labs as the new libraries for cities. Luckily, we managed not only to work with that mayor, but with the political affiliation, and the plan keeps going. So there are already like 5 public Fab Labs in Barcelona. So I want to keep going, and not only Fab Labs. One of the key things is like, this is not only about Fab Labs or maker spaces, but also thinking about the other, the purple dots are the private initiatives related with digital fabrication that happens in Barcelona. The green ones are the public Fab Labs, but there are other initiatives that are related with industry in terms of advanced manufacturing and new modes of production. This is what the clock I was mentioning, but again, you could see it live in the Fab City website. Just finishing in the next couple of minutes that I have, this initial provocation from the mayor of Barcelona became as a global network as well. What we were surprised is after Barcelona launched this initiative, we had the request from the city of Boston, the city of Ekurhuleni and Shenzhen to say, hey, we want to be part of Fab City. And we say, well, we're still figuring it out, but fine, you can join. And that's how it started somehow, right? We didn't plan to, okay, let's make a Fab City and let's create a network of cities. It was actually something that just emerged. And it's not something to intend to make cities to follow something, but actually to become part of something and understand that whatever they're doing locally, it contributes to the local discourse. Even if they are a big city, you are going to be inspiring all the cities that are part of this network. So right now there are 38 cities. And I give you a couple of examples just to finish. In Paris, apart from organizing the Global Fab City Summit a couple of years ago and convincing the mayor of the city, the local Fab City Association, they managed to get this large, all industrial building, and they're turning into a library of materials in which they're aiming to use waste coming mainly from the events that Paris hosts. There is a lot. And then classify and document that waste and turn it as the source materials that designers can use in order to make new products, right? And that's one of the core projects of the Fab City Grand Party, but also they have been doing different analysis to the city of Paris to work in different areas of the city to enable circular production projects. This is the city of Sao Paulo, which following the inspiration from Barcelona, created a public network of 12 Fab Labs. That's kind of a new type of a public service. And most of them located in the favelas, near where the most needed communities are. This is in Seoul, Korea, where there is the Seoul Innovation Fab Lab. There is the one in the north, but they're working, believe it or not, it's in Korean, but I can translate for you. Not because I understand it, but because I know the project is, they're working on developing a super kind of a micro factory, which is a complementary infrastructure for Fab Labs, also based on advanced manufacturing. And for instance, in Puebla, in Mexico, the team is working with the local university and the local government in the recovery of a central area of the city in which they want to create a program of connecting the craftsmanship with new digital technologies as a kind of a new economic motor for the existing artisans to upgrade themselves with new skills, but also to put it in evidence in a space, in an area of the city. So this is an evolution from the full stack that Hannah showed at the beginning. We're still working on it. It looks a little bit more with higher resolution. We're changing the name from full stack, which is very techy, very geeky, and call it strata, with something that you can relate with geologics, or you can relate it also to lasagna. But basically it's trying to understand how all these steps of creating a distributed infrastructure, supporting learning, supporting innovation, deploying innovations into territories, coordinating with communities, thinking about the bioregional implications of that, again, reference to Patrick Guedes, and then sharing knowledge globally can be a way in which we can operationalize or make operational this whole Fab City global initiative. I want to finish by inviting you to read more. Online, you can find our book. It's free to read it online. You can also order. It's print on demand, of course. We don't have stock. And if you are more curious to get to know more about what we're doing in our programs and our projects, you can check either the IAC, the FabLab Barcelona website, or the whole Fab City Global Initiative website. Thank you very much. Yeah, 3 minutes more. So thank you.